everyone, it's Jake at Jake's Metal Chat. Hope you're all well and welcome to episode 61 of my Metal Vault, where I will be exploring and showing you my favourite albums within heavy metal to thrash metal to death metal, black metal, doom metal, sludge metal, folk metal, you name it, all of that excellent stuff. As well as talking about the albums, I will be talking about the band, so a brief history and any releases leading up to the album that I have picked. I can only apologise for this. Had something happen in my personal life that derailed me from just doing these videos, doing the other videos, the other series that I have on here. And well, more specifically this one, because I love doing this series and I just was not like, I was just like, don't feel like doing anything, don't feel like planning anything out. But I'm not going to let it affect me. And I'm glad I'm back. And I got so many more albums to show you, because my 70th episode is a classic from the 1970s. The very beginning of the 1970s. And you're going to know which album that is as soon as you see it. But for this one, because the last one I did was Ace of Spades, My Motorhead. Classic, absolute classic from 1980. But this one is from the late 90s, and it's from a band from Los Osos. I'm not sure how you say that. It's in California. I'm not sure where in California, but I do apologize for butchering that. You know what my pronunciations are like. You probably haven't missed those. But yeah, this band here, this album, killer, technical, brutal death. Old school, technical, brutal death. This is Deeds of Flesh. A band that I've yet to see live, and well, I hope I do at some point. If they come to the UK, that'd be cool. If not, I'll travel to see them. And this album is their second studio album overall. Their second studio album. They've had more albums released since then. Last one released back in 2020. But we're going all the way back to the beginning with these guys. So, once again, this is Deeds of Flesh. And their second studio album, their 1998 album, Inbreeding the Anthropophagus. And that artwork is funky as hell, but cool at the same time. There's a lot going on. Of course, here's the back. 8 songs overall. This was released by Repulse Records back in the day. It says Disorder there, but I think it was re-released by this label here. Was it Displeased Records? Which I don't know if they're still going, but I know Repulse isn't going anymore. And this is what I like to do, of course, as you know, get the book out with the artwork. A logo in flames. There's a lot of stuff going on there. And of course, let's show a few lyrics and pictures. So I believe this one with Eric, there he is, with long hair of back in the day. And of course, he sadly passed away in 2018. But his legacy lives on, like I've said before. They may be gone, but they're forever on, you know, absolute classics like this. They're forever cemented here. Oh, yeah, I forgot to show the CD, which is really cool. Red logo, and also for the album title and little skull right there. And of course, a bit of artwork there. So yeah, let's talk about Deeds of Flesh. They formed in 1993 in, I'm not going to try and say this again. I should have, you know, put it up and gone on a pronunciation website. But again, my pronunciations are not always the best. Formed in 1993, so they've been a band for 31 years. I'm not sure when that year they formed, but been around for quite a long time. And they were formed by, of course, I mentioned Eric. And the other members were Josh, Helitz, and where is he? Where is he? Jacob Kingston, who is the only original member left in the band. So he's pretty much been on every single release since the band formed. So 2 years after forming, they released their first EP in 1995 called Gradually Melted, which is one of my favorite songs. This version and the version on this album as well. That was released by Wild Rags Records. 4 songs. Of course, it was featured on Ken's Death Metal Crypt. Of course, he's no longer on YouTube now. But I remember that demo being on there, along with some other absolute classics on there. But yeah. So I believe Joey was gone after the release of their debut called Trading Pieces from 1996, released on Repulse Records. Of course, Eric and Jacob still continuing on the band. Of course, they did the compilation of Inbreeding the Athropophagi and Trading Pieces. And then that goes on to this one, which then features Brad Palmer on drums. And I believe he left the band shortly after this, but he was in another band and did one album with them. And yeah, so the only 2 original members that on here obviously were Eric and Jacob, but of course those that are still with us today, Jacob, you know, because Eric and Jacob take it in turns doing vocals on pretty much all of them. But this album here has guest vocals, guest backing vocals by a legend within brutal death metal itself, Matty Way. Now, you know who Matty Way is if you are into your technical brutal death, your slam. You're going to know who the man is, because he used to be in bands such as Abominable Putridity, but the biggest one, of course, is Disgorge, who I have seen. Of course, he was on the first 2 albums. He's also in Pathology, Haunted, which, as far as I know, I haven't got the releases, but obviously Matty Way did guest vocals on that, because Eric did guest vocals on at least one of Disgorge's releases. Yes, at least one of them. As well as Flesh Consumed, Inherit Disease, Prophecy, and Viral Load. There's another band. Like I said, if you're more into your technical brutal death than your old school death. I like my old school. I like my technical brutal, and like technical brutal death and some slam still, but obviously more old school stuff. And obviously they had someone do sound effects, which was Thomas E. Jingale. I hope I said that right. And he only did stuff. He did sound effects for just this album, but then did engineering for the first album, this album, Path of the Weakening, and Mark of Legion. So for those 4 albums, and also for Disgorge, as well as other brutal death metal bands. And let's get on to who did what. So John Zig did the artwork for this album. And by looking at the picture, he's also a tattoo artist. But he used to be in bands himself. So music stuff. So obviously, Deeds of Flesh. He's done stuff for Abominable Putridity, Acranius, Amputated, Bristol Brutal Slam Maniacs. Just going for all the bands. Baphomet, of course, absolute awesome bang, the Dead Shout Inherit. What an album, that album if you love your old school more than your technical brutal death. Who else has Mr. John Zig done for? Blood Truth, who I have seen from Italy, technical brutal death. Can't remember what year I saw him, but yeah, that's one of the bands he did stuff for. Cover art mainly. Logos for a few of them. Who's another band that people may know from this list? And there's quite a few. I'm trying to pick out the ones that I know the most because there's someone who I don't really know. Obviously, you mentioned Deeds of Flesh, Defeated Sanity, absolute legends within brutal death, German brutal death, and I've seen them quite a few times, and they're really, really great live. I need to see them again. Who else we got? Disentomb, of course, all the way from Australia. Need to see them again because they are so good live. Man, yeah, done a lot of logos and stuff for them. Exhumer. Who else? Eternal Suffering. Now everyone's gonna know Eternal. Not the Eternal Suffering that I know. No, that's Internal Suffering. This is Eternal Suffering. So different band overall. Godless Truth. Man, great. Not grotesque, but not the grotesque that we all know from Sweden. His own band, which is Images of Violence. Inherit Disease, as I mentioned earlier. Cranium, which, of course, Norwegian slam legends. Of course, they're all over the place now. But obviously, members such as Mats, obviously, one of the only original members that is from Norway. And my mate Jason, who's from here in Bristol. Just mentioning some bands that everyone's going to know. The Black Dahlia Murder, he's done stuff for. Twitch of the Death Nerve, who I finally got to see now because I know one of the guys from the band. Viral Load, Vile, Vomit the Soul, Vomit Remnants from Japan, really good stuff. And yeah, tons of bands. The list is very long there. Steve Miller did the photographs, and he did guest vocals for a band called Ironhead. Never heard of him, but did stuff for Incantation, Diabolical Conquest, did the photographs for that, the photography for that, and also for Disgorge. And then Jackie did the artwork inlay for Trading Pieces and, of course, for Inbreeding the Athropophagi. But then I see the eye. I don't know. I was trying to say, is it Athropophagi? But I think it's pronounced Athropophagi, but they just put an eye there. I don't know. I'm just gonna say Athropophagi, but because when I put it through a pronunciation tool, that's how it came out as. So yeah, 8 tracks overall. Let's crack on with it. So first track is the shortest one on here, being 1 minute 21 seconds. That's End of All. So very quick like technical brutality there, which then goes on to all the other songs. So Feeding Time, the title track, Inbreeding the Athropophagi, and then Infecting Them with Falsehood. Cavus of Flesh, Ritual of Battle, Fly Shrine, and to end it all that technical brutality, because it's all just technical in-your-face brutality throughout this entire album. Of course, track number 8, it ends with that Gradually Melted, which is a little bit faster than the EP version, because the EP version is a little bit Like, not, I don't mean slow as in Doom. It's just a bit slower, bit more mid-paced than this one, because this one just goes full on. And getting Eric and Jacob's vocals just, obviously they're just bouncing off each other, and it's just absolutely phenomenal. Brad's drumming is intense. Eric's guitar playing is excellent. Same with Jacob's bass playing. Matty Way with his backing vocals adding another layer of brutality. You know, just if you know your brutal death and you know the amount of stuff, because you get like the really low gutturals, and sometimes you get those high pitch vocals, not like really high pitch, but those higher brutal death vocals, which would mainly come from Eric, because Eric would do lows and some highs. I don't think Jacob never did, as far as I'm aware, because I watched found footage on YouTube of them back in 90. I want to say 96, maybe 96 or 95. I'm not sure which year. No, it might have been 96, as their first album would have been out by then. And Jacob did all the lower stuff. Eric did all the higher stuff. But you put all three of those elements together, so the guitars, the bass, drums, the vocals from Eric, Jacob, and Matty, and put in this album, you got one hell of an album here. I don't own their first album. I do own half of The Weakening. I just need to sort out my CD collection, because I've been getting CDs out for this series, obviously, and other stuff, so I need to rearrange everything. But I know I got that album there somewhere. Just sorry, I thought I was going to burp. Just it's insane, just an insane album. I thought, because I was thinking of albums to talk about, I thought I haven't mentioned any Brutal Death yet. Excuse me. And I thought I need to go back to listening to some Brutal Death again, technical Brutal Death stuff, and need to mention a bit more here on the channel. And I thought, let's start with these guys. And of course, when you think California, that area, you don't really think death metal and brutal death. Not really. Of course, you had thrash, you had bands like, obviously in the early days, Metallica's early days, thrash metal, and Slayer and Exodus. But then you got all the glam bands like Motley Crue being the biggest one. But then a bit later on, you got stuff like this, of course. Fear Factory are from that area. But yeah, you never think California death metal. But you, in those deepest parts of California, you got these guys right here. And I've never seen these guys live ever. So if anyone has seen them live, comment down below and tell me what you think. Did you see them on this tour? I usually leave that to the end, but yeah, did you see these guys on this tour when this album came out? If so, what was your overall opinion? And if you heard this back in the day, what was your overall opinion of the album? But for me, loved it. Loved it, loved it, loved it. And I got a load more old school brutal death metal albums. I know there's quite a lot in there that I can show you. It's taking them out. And obviously seeing there, where's the Deeds of Flesh? Seeing that, I thought, yep. Because obviously I was looking for albums and bands, and I thought, these guys, haven't mentioned them yet. And of course, if I was going to do a part 3 to my American underground metal releases, that would be in there. Because I don't think I mentioned it. I'm going to double check after this video, but I don't think I mentioned it. But I'm mentioning it here first. And, man. What an album. What a band. And it'd be cool if these guys do come to the UK because I definitely need to see these guys live. And I know there's a lot of people out there, people I know personally. I got a feeling love Deeds of Flesh. If not, then I mean you can't like every single band that's technical brutal death or old school death or thrash or black metal or sludge metal, doom metal. You can't like every band. But I know if you're really into more that side of death metal, you're gonna love bands like this more than say one of my favorites, Disincarnate. You know, James Murphy's just absolute brilliant death metal band. So my overall conclusions of this album, actually before we get to that, obviously I did say my favorite song is Gradually Melted, but I also really liked Ritual of Battle, really just solid technical parts in there. Like I said, it's all in your face, technical, brutal death metal madness. And of course, there's brutal death metal like that came out early 2000s, throughout the 2000s, even 2010s. But if I'm going to listen to brutal death metal stuff, you know, earlier I would go for something more old school like this. Hence why I love their EP Gradually Melted. But if anyone's familiar with this band but hasn't heard this album, do check it out because it is some absolutely solid stuff right here. Or if you're into brutal death and you never heard Deeds of Flesh, go check out Deeds of Flesh. Even if you start with this album, or debut, or one of their later albums, either way, you are checking out this band and showing them your support. So my overall conclusions, it's that big word, heavy. It's technical, brutal, savagery, in your face. Just monstrous. I don't think I've said that yet. Monstrous. Man. Solid production. And a timeless masterpiece. I'm going to say that a lot because this is a timeless masterpiece. It's 1998. This album is 20, 25. I want to say 25, maybe 26 years old. But yeah, 20, over 20 years old. 20, just over 20 years of technical brutal death madness right here. And I've got a load more like this to show you in future episodes of this series. But yeah, the artwork I think sums up the album's lyrical content because getting back to the page here, they did more themes on death, darkness, depravity, and torture, and then later on, and I like this lyrical theme because obviously there's one band that I need to show on here, and I just remembered, and I'm going to write them down in a bit. They see later albums focus more on sci-fi, aliens, and invasion, so more on the extraterrestrial side of metal than the more death and darkness side of it. When you hear more brutal death metal stuff, it's usually that side of it. You don't usually hear stuff like aliens and sea monsters or whatever. But yeah, they went from stuff like this. So trying to think if the album's based off of something specific, but getting back into the history of the band, obviously they are currently on unique. Said it earlier, unique lead, unique leader records, and yeah, been releasing everything since then. The last album was Nucleus, which I did hear a little bit over lockdown. Obviously, it's a little bit different from this. Still heavy and brutal, but if you're more into the older stuff, then you're gonna like this a little bit more. But yeah, if you new to Deeds of Flesh and this is the first album that you check out, then that's that's a good way to start. And then go check out the first time. But check out any album that you wish to start off with this band. Show them your support. This is mainly for those who love more, and I keep saying the same things over and over again. If you love more technicality, more brutality in your death metal, you love more lower gutturals, more chunkier technical guitar riffs, more chunky bass. Also that technicality there. Loads and loads of blast beats. I mean loads of blast beats. There's a load on this album and first album and albums after this one. So many blast beats, even on the not demo, EP. So if you're more into your technical guitar and bass, chunky riffs, so much machine gun blast beating, Deeds of Flesh and Disgorge and countless bands, Defeated Sanity, countless bands that have all of those elements. So once again, people, this is a timeless masterpiece here. Deeds of Flesh and Inbreeding the Anthropophagus. Technical, brutal, and just very well executed with its production, with the playing, with all the guitar work, the bass work, the drumming, everything. So much technicality on this album and other albums, not just from them, but from other bands that, if I can remember a bunch now, you'll know them. If not, go check them out. And that's it for that episode of my Metal Vault. Look at some two here, because obviously I'm not just going to do death metal and grindcore and thrash. Obviously, more black metal, more doom metal, sludge, hopefully some more folk metal as well that came out in the early 2000s and the 90s and throughout the 2000s, mainly early 2000s, like I said. Because the next one I got is a classic in grindcore and death metal. Like I said, I will be listing all the bands and albums that I have coming up. Once I've written down more bands, I think I only got a couple more to fill out. Then I will do that list on the community page. But I can tell you who I got coming up for the next episode. I'm not going to say the album name because I'll let you see that for yourselves. Next band I'm talking about is Inbreeding, legends within death metal and grindcore, classic death metal, horror themed death metal. And you're going to see which album that I'm talking about in that episode. But bands like Deeds of Flesh, I know there's more people. I know people who I know from like just going to a lot of brutal death metal gigs, slam gigs, technical death metal gigs, more into that stuff than say, they'll be more into bands like them than they are into Massacre, and I love Massacre. Because I listen to stuff like this and Grave and Nocturnus, which is old school technical death. Bands like, just looking at my jacket, bands like Underground than I would more brutal death, but obviously going to be listening to Deeds of Flesh a lot more often now as I've since started listening to them again. And there will be more brutal death in this series to come. But thank you very much for tuning in. I've been Jacob Jake's Metal Chat. Keep the banner of metal well and truly high. And I will see you all again in the next episode of my Metal Vault.